Hey.
So if you could have one barnyard animal to raise, what would it be?
Immediately, I'd say a goat.
A goat?
A goat.
Why a goat?
Because I don't have to mow. Hello and welcome to the Resilient Lineage podcast, where we reflect on the past, anticipate the future, and discover what God is up to today. My name's Olivia.
And I'm Milo. You really don't like mowing, do you?
I don't.
That's good.
No, okay, this is the best feeling in the world, right? Is when it's like 80 degrees outside and you've already spent like 20 minutes. The blade stopped working, so then you had to let it sit so it wouldn't you got to let it cool down because it's overheated. And then you're looking in the yard next to us and we have Mr. John, and Mr. John is, what do you call it?
A landscaper.
A landscaper. So he has like all the equipment. And I remember looking over and he has one of those standing mowers. He's already done his half of yard in like 2 minutes holding a Coke and just sipping on that thing. And I was like, this is not fair. Like, he has like this equipment.
Yeah, because he's a landscaper.
He's prone and he has all that. And I'm just having this, it's a push mower. Like, it's not like a riding lawn mower. Yeah. Well, but you know what? I got the summer gains. I sweated a lot. I threw up one time. But you know what? I remember going to youth group and they're like, what'd you do today? I'm like, I mowed my yard.
Yeah. Sense of accomplishment.
Let me just.
But you'd rather, that's why you'd get a goat.
Yeah.
Is so you wouldn't have to worry about your summer gains.
Yeah, I'd name my goat Opie.
Opie?
Opie, my goat. Opie.
We're looking at a proverb today that has to do with
animals.
An animal.
An animal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a passage of scripture. You came. It was at
21 Days Prayer, and I don't know what I was doing actually. We're supposed to be praying. I was reading my Bible, and I was in Proverb 14. The whole chapter is this contrast between the wise and the foolish, and like the righteous and the unrighteous. And in the middle of this, there's like this, like it sticks out because it's like the previous verse. I mean, I could read the previous verse, but like I'll just read the verse we're supposed to be talking about. And it says, where there are no oxen, the manger is clean, but abundant crops comes by the strength of the ox. And so like that just stood out. I'm like, I'm reading and I'm like, da 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 da. Like all the proverbs kind of like sound the same. And then you hear that and you're like, whoa, okay. Like, let me go back and reread it. So I remember coming to Dad after the service was over and I was like, hey, check this out. Like I found this cool proverb. And if you know Milo Curtis, he's like, oh yeah, I did like a sermon on that. And I was like, okay. Just got a little less cool. I'm just kidding. But
it is kind of one of those things where you're like, look at this new thing I found. And somebody's like, I found that a long time ago. And
we're like, okay, well, I'm going to go tell someone else now. And I'll say it again. Like it says, where there are no oxen, the manger is clean, but abundant crops come by the strength of the ox. And like the thesis that I wrote, and I like sent this to my dad this last week. And like there's a work that the Lord has equipped us and prepared us to do right now that requires that we invest in the right things and engage in the work it requires. That was all the Holy Spirit. Like, I remember, like, sitting there, and I was like, hey, Lord, like, and I was like, wow, I sound like my dad. This is so cool. But, yeah, so we're going to come about this we're going to talk about 4 components with living the abundant life.
Well, and because the whole point of this text is, what does it look like to have abundant crops? Now, we're not in an agrarian culture anymore.
Where that's like a common profession.
And so there's this,
language.
There's this sort of, I remember when I read this, when it stood out to me for the first time. I was deployed. So every day, if everybody's like looking for a great way to spice up their devotional time, if you read a proverb every day, there's 31 proverbs. So if it's the 15th of the month, it's March 15th, then read Proverbs 15. And if you miss a few days, okay, whatever, it's March 21. Which proverb do you read?
Yeah, it's 21.
Right, Proverbs 21. So that I like that kind of accessibility of the Proverbs. To me, it's very practical in what it's trying to lay out.
Yeah.
And I think there's these texts like this one that there is a lot of meaning packed in a really small space.
In one sentence.
Yeah, which is those are always fun things to find, because you realize, man, this is like a gift that keeps on. I keep peeling away layers and layers and layers and layers. There's way more here than I would have anticipated. So there's this concept of the abundant life that I think is, like in today's world, how do you think people would define abundance?
I did some research this last week, and they compared this. When we hear abundance, especially like with crops, you think of like all these crops, right? But this guy kind of broke it down into like pleasures versus usefulness.
Okay.
And like you want an abundance of feelings and emotions and like these kind of tangible things that you experience in like a very short period of time. Like that's the abundance, or I think people are more gravitated towards, like in the world where how much money can I get in a short period of time? Mm-hmm. Will this satisfy my feeling right now? Does the drink or does this doing pot, like does that help relieve anything? And will that give me what I really want? So in some ways what I hear you saying, it's sort of the quantity of something in quick supply. Mm-hmm. Okay. I think. The high quantity of something. That's probably a better way the high quantity of something in quick supply. Mm-hmm. That's like accessible. Yeah. Not by like your own work per se. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that there's some measure of kind of, well, maybe I could see it being both. But it's not the hard work that is recognized or celebrated. It's the abundance that's recognized and celebrated. Yeah, the word abundance here, the Hebrew word, just means a lot. To be honest with you, it just means plenty, multitude, a mass amount. There's not like, so when we talk about abundance, one is this image of there's way more than necessary. So we're not talking about. And I think it's okay to talk about these things because I see Christians sort of slip into two camps about this stuff. One is this could very much lead into the prosperity gospel, which is God wants you to be healthy, wealthy, and wise, right? There's this, we should have plenty of everything in our lives. And if you don't, you just need to have more faith. You need to trust the Lord and, pray for more things and trust, give money to this preacher, as a step of faith or whatever it is, right? So there's that kind of camp of things, power of positive thinking and stuff. And then there's kind of the opposite end of that spectrum, which is, sort of the virtuous Christian is the Christian who has little, is the Christian who lives with some measure of meagerness or limited quantity. And so because every day they have to rely upon the Lord just to even take care of their needs. And I think there's both of those are a distortion of the role of abundance in our life. So on the one hand, it's saying the mark of faith, well, both of them are saying the mark of faith is indicated by your posture towards things, right? So the mark of faith in the health and wealth prosperity gospel is if you have a lot of things, then you must have a lot of faith. And then the other is the complete opposite, right? That person doesn't have very many things, or I don't have many things, so therefore I must be high in faith. And neither one of those is a template that we see in the scriptures. Now, having said all that, Jesus said, deny yourself, take up your cross and follow me. Like, don't worry about tomorrow, for it has enough worries in itself. Seek first the kingdom of God today. Like, there's these things that scripture calls us to not love the world or the things in the world, the desires of the eyes, desires of the flesh, the pride of life. That we need to be very mindful of what our relationship with the world is.
So, and the things that this world would have to offer us. So there's a part of that that I don't want to gloss over. At the same time, there is this place of kind of going, okay, but so what is the appropriate posture for having a kind of a theology of abundance that is kingdom centered, that is kingdom focused, that excels my walk with the Lord. And that's what we're going to talk about it today is if you have a lot of things, could that distract you from your faith in Christ? Absolutely. If you don't have a lot of things, could that distract you in your faith in Christ?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Right. So this is not about the quantity of stuff. It's how can the things in our life that the Lord has blessed us with, however that needs to be defined for an individual, be used for kingdom purposes. And so this proverb then, where there are no oxen, the manger is clean, for abundant crops come by the strength of the ox, speaks to there's a way of sort of managing your life that leads to abundance of crops, but it also keeps some healthy things in bounds, right? And that's what we're going to talk about with this. So we're calling this the 4 components of living an abundant life. This is obviously not exhaustive. We're kind of using this one little verse to set the parameters of what this means, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, the first one.
Yeah, the vision to contribute beyond your household.
So this first component to living the abundant life, the vision to contribute beyond your household. So if I don't need abundance, if like we're a family of 4, I don't need abundance if I'm just focused on our family of 4.
You just need what you need for us, and that's your cap.
That's all I need. And there are some folks that think that way. It's very easy to slip, like for us 4 no more, right? It's easy to slip into that kind of mentality, but that's not what God's called us to be. That's not the type of community that the church is supposed to be. And so as Christ followers, what does it look like to step into this community and recognize I have a responsibility to this larger community, and I need to kind of get a sense of what does it look like to contribute then
to them,
to this larger community. And I need to kind of wrestle that down. And because I want to be able to gather more resources, not so that I have more toys, but so that the kingdom can be further expanded.
Yeah. Like I was doing some research on like the significance of the ox back in the day. Like when we hear it, we're like, yeah, like that's a farm animal. They can do things, like they're strong. And like kind of what you're talking about with if you only have in mind that, oh yeah, I'm just gonna work for us 4. Like no one else, like it's not like anyone else is depending on us. Then you can probably till the field yourself. You have no ox.
Yeah, there's no need.
There's no need to have an ox if all you're feeding is a family of 4. You can have like a side garden.
Yeah, and in today's culture, it would be there's no reason for me to go get a John Deere tractor to just feed my family.
It's like I have a hoe and I have a shovel.
Yeah, I might get a rototiller that I can buy on sale during Father's Day at Home Depot.
But there's no need for that.
But the ox in this day and age, the ox is the professional equipment. It's the expensive resource that is intended to generate additional resources.
Yeah.
Right?
I'll just read my little thing. I did some research over the weekend.
You did a lot of this was all your idea, which you did a lot of good work on.
The significance of the ox. And ox were very large bovine animals that God created for the service of man. And they were typically castrated bulls, so they're like pretty focused on what they're supposed to do and have reached full maturity and strength. It's not like someone buys maybe, what do you call a young bull? A young bull?
Calf.
But is that a cow?
No, cows are females.
Whoa. Oh yeah, you're right. Never mind. Let me just keep going. Reach full maturity. And bulls themselves do not submit well to equipment. Like it takes an effort to like put a yoke on it And like, it's not an easy, like a dog can just come to you. It's ready to be geared up. It's ready to go outside and have fun. Like, these are like huge animals that are pretty stubborn. They easily weigh a ton and can pull a tremendous amount of weight. So for a farmer that has a field, that might be living with this vision that, how can I benefit my community around me? Like, this is the type of investment that they might want to be making or start preparing for. And that starts with a decision and a vision for that end purpose of, how can I be a resource to not just my immediate family, but a resource to the community that God has for me.
And that require, in each of these things, we're going to kind of talk about, well, what's required of me? How do I get that? What do I have to do to be able to captivate that, capture that? And I don't think a vision is something we sit down and create. I mean, I suppose that could be a part of the process. I'm listening to a book right now on, kind of how to lay out a vision for your life and sort of a strategic business plan. And it's good stuff. Like, it's good steps to walk through. And there's all kinds of resources out there that I'm sure folks have heard of or been, exposed to. But I think if you're really going to capture a vision that sustains you over the long haul, that is beyond just your immediate needs or beyond the needs of your household, then it's cultivated by an intimacy with God, that you have a walk with the Lord that is theologically and in your belief system and in your convictions, you're cultivating this, okay, who am I called to serve? What is my responsibility to those people? Where am I, we're going to get into some of these things, but like you kind of take those questions into your intimate walk with the Lord, and you're asking those things all the time. I mean, that's one of the things. I don't know how, I don't know what's normative for people, but there's not a day that goes by that or even conversations I'm having or conversations I've had with folks or interactions that I've had that I'm trying to assess, like, what's my responsibility in this moment, Lord, to be kind to this person, listen to this person, offer words of counsel or advice, ask them questions around the things that they're interested in, like that kind of posture towards the community that I find myself in. And because what I'm listening for, what I'm paying attention to is like, Lord, what's the vision here? What is my responsibility? What's my role in all of this? And that, I don't think you can, I think if it's born out of your walk with the Lord, then it's something you can't get away from. You'll live with it. If it's born out of, I had a bunch of really good ideas and a retreat that I went to, and I sat down and I wrote down these 3 things, and this is what's going to shape my life for the next, or my business plan, or it's like, that's all fine. But, years ago I heard a pastor say, he said, what the Lord calls, the Lord sustains. And I think there's this, when God gives you a vision for what your role is within the community, that's the thing he's interested in sustaining. Because there will be times when it's difficult and it's not fun and it's messy. We're going to talk about that here in a bit. But when it's something that's from the Lord, there's a sustainability to it that the Spirit will empower as you move forward.
That's good.
Okay.
Second one.
Second component.
Yeah, the raw potential that needs to be worked into disciplined action. A farmer could look at his field all day and be like, an abundance could be made from that. But you know what? I like my manger clean. I'm going to go clean it some more. And you and I were kind of talking about this, and it's not, to have an abundance might not be, I need more land. It's just what needs to be more cultivated. Is it the land and the resource? Like, is it exposing my resources to this land so that the Lord can do a good work?
Yeah.
Or are you going to be super obsessive on, I don't want to smell like the poop and the crap and all of that comes with. So I'm not going to pursue that because that's uncomfortable to me.
Well, and I think too, along with that, there's this idea that, like you were talking about, how the oxen has to be castrated, right? Which means why do you castrate an ox? Because its job is not to
Reproduce.
Its job is to till. Its job is to work this field. That's where it's going to find its abundance. It's not in this other way. Now, obviously, we need ox to reproduce, so that's a whole other discussion, right?
Yeah.
But the idea is we've got to practice some discipline. There's got to be something restrained in this place in order for it to be productive in another place. It requires a yoke to be put upon it. There's this, one of the things I've seen over the years, it's always fun when you see somebody who's just naturally gifted at at something. And it's a little, it's humbling to see that and be like, man, I wish I was like, one of the things, I'm not musically talented. I really wish I was. Like, that's a thing. And by the way, it's like, oh, well, have you really tried it? Stuff? I don't know. I can't say I've really, really tried, which I probably could, but like I'm not just naturally skilled at some things. But I've been around, I remember there was this one person in a Bible college, Brian Schubert, and came into our dining hall, had a piano in it, and he was at the piano playing, and he was just tearing up this keyboard, and we were like, oh, he was a freshman, and he was 1 year below me, so I was a sophomore, so he was a new kid on campus, and I went over to him like, oh, Brian, that's really good. And he's like, yeah. And I said, how long have you been playing? He's like, like a year and a half. And it was like, what how is that even? And he was like, just musically gifted and talented all over the place, that's just one of those things that to be around that kind of raw talent, whether, sometimes you'll see that with athletics, people that are just naturally athletic. It's fun to watch.
Yeah.
It's really fun to admire. I think one of the things this is kind of this hidden truth, or not hidden, but this not immediately obvious truth of this text is that the oxen just don't till fields, right? There's more to it than just that. So all the raw resources are there, the raw strength, the raw power, the raw ability, the raw capacity, it's all there, but it has to be disciplined. It has to be put into disciplined action. And I think where I see myself over the years, and even a lot of other folks that, were good, I wouldn't say I'm a raw talent at superior talent at anything, to be honest.
Wii Sports. I'm just kidding.
Not even, no, especially not that. But so I've had to work hard to become pretty good at a few things. Do you know what I mean? So it means I've had to be incredibly disciplined. But then I've also seen other folks that have been incredibly talented. Just the raw talent is astonishing, but they weren't disciplined. And as a result, over the years, there's not an abundance. They're not living for a vision that's greater than themselves, right? They're kind of the charismatic nature that may be found in their raw talent or ability or gifting is enough to sort of get them by in a particular moment, but it's not enough to cultivate a lifestyle around that vision of what God has. And so I think there's this there's this other piece where folks can live in this, because I think probably most people don't live with a gob amount of raw talent, just kind of oozing out of them. And so, but there's enough there to make something happen. But you can slip into this thinking of, well, if I just need one more thing, I just need, if I just had a better yoke, then I'll be able to really get after it. If I have a little bit more field, or if I have a little bit, whatever the case may be, then I'll be able to. So there's this mentality that I just need another thing. And then I'll be able to be focused and disciplined and be able to really harness this raw potential. And I see this, and maybe, I don't think this is out of bounds, but maybe it is. I'll let you tell me. I see this, people do this when it even comes to maybe some sins in their life that they're not surrendering to the Lord, or becoming disciplined in their spiritual disciplines to overcome, or the practice of spiritual disciplines, that they think, well, when I get out of high school and I'm on my own, that's when I'm going to really take this thing seriously, right? And then it turns into, well, when I'm dating, that's when I'm going to take this thing seriously.
Totally.
Or when I get married, or when I have kids, or when the kids are more independent, when the kids are out of the house. And there's always, when I retire, like there's always this, when I have a little bit more money, there's always this, if I just had a little bit more, or I was in just a little bit different life stage, then I could. And I don't think that's how the Lord operates. Right? It kind of comes back to our stewardship series, right? This is what you've been given now. So what are you going to do now with this raw material that the Lord has entrusted to you to serve, to be fit, to be disciplined as you ought to be disciplined?
No, that's so good. And like what you're kind of talking about for stewardship, you have to be content with what you have. Like that's what you're talking about with, if I only had this and if I only had this, then I could actually do the real mission God has for me, which entails, the mission God wants you to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the other piece of it too is, like, if I'm not content when there is an abundance, what am I going to use that abundance for? For myself. But if I'm content when the abundance comes, hey, this isn't for me. We're fine.
Yeah.
This is for the community I'm called to serve. And so the contentment doesn't come after the abundance. The contentment comes before the abundance. That's why you're able to kind of provide these resources. This is where you see people like, if I had $1 billion, I'd give money, I'd give money away and there wouldn't be any needs. And it's like, well, what are you doing right now? Well, I don't have anything. It's like, yeah, you do. Well, I don't have a whole lot. I mean, I got a mortgage I got to pay, or I got a rent I got to pay, or I've got a lease on my car, or I've got payments on my car, or I've got this, that, and the other. And it's like, how quick were you to take out a loan on that car versus going and getting one you could with cash? Well, I deserve a nice car. Do you know what I mean? Like this is what this is going on. Yeah, this is what's that's oftentimes keeping people from living that abundant life, right?
Yeah,
is they're not taking the raw potential that's in front of them and going, okay, how do I discipline this? Not for the purposes of discipline's sake, but discipline for the purposes of living out this vision that God has in my life.
No, that's good. So if the first one was the vision to contribute beyond our household, and the second one was the raw potential that needs to be worked into disciplined action, the third one is the investment that needs to be made for a better tomorrow. I don't think we're ever going to reach a point where the Lord just has us stop working, and stop working for his good. Like, I think when we give our life to Christ and we want to live faithfully, the Lord wants to use good for your whole life. And the Lord wants you to do something until, you're with him and to serve his kingdom. So when it talks about an investment, right? Like, we talked about how if someone is just serving their family, they have no need for an ox. But an ox is an investment. Those aren't cheap things. Mm-mm. Because it takes a very long time for it to be born. And chickens, on the other hand, chickens populate no other. That's why I figured this out. This is why chickens are so cheap at the store compared to ground beef. Yeah. Ground beef, okay, because this is real.
Olivia's been living by a budget. Paying attention to the cost of things.
I'm why are they so expensive? Yeah. It's it takes a very long time for them to become mature.
For beef to come mature, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And farmers know farmer language. There's agricultural stuff, and then there's people that have cattle farms, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, an ox, what we were talking about, has the capacity and the raw material for many acres to be cultivated. But you have to invest in it. It's not something that I'll just wait until someone gives it to me. Then I'll... Or a farmer would have to save every month for these things. These are not cheap things. These are the tractor. I could go to the thrift store and find a push mower for $50. And it's that will do the job. It's sure, that might be that, but what are you, that's not the end.
Yeah.
Like, are you socking money? And that requires for you to be content with not having certain things that maybe you're used to.
Yeah. Well, and it's to that point. This is something we always talk about in our family. A yes to this is a no to
something else.
Yeah. So if I'm going to say yes to, like I just looked it up, like, and maybe there's one way to say, do you have a chicken mentality or a beef mentality? Right? So for a chicken, from the time it's born to the time it's ready to slaughter, guess how many weeks it takes?
So like 9.
6 to 8 weeks.
Dang.
So there's a kind of a quick turnaround. Yeah. Now I like chicken.
It's fine.
Chicken's great. Yeah. Grass-fed cattle, guess how long it takes from the time it's born to the time it's ready for slaughter?
Over 10 months.
18 to 24 months. So it's more of a long-term investment. The point is, like, we're not talking about, in this passage, it's not talking about slaughtering. I create that contrast that a lot of people sort of have, they want to focus on the short term instead of focusing on the long term.
Yeah.
And I was watching Dave Ramsey, who's the guy that we've followed, and there's a lot of stuff I agree with what he does. There's some stuff I kind of go like, I think there's a little bit more wiggle room than there, but there's a lot of stuff that we've paid attention to over the years. And one of those things was like, he has this tip where he's like, save your money and buy something nice once that will last instead of buying the cheap thing 5 times, where then you end up spending more than if you would have just saved up your money and bought the nice thing once. And I think I think that's
that's the you only cry once, like only cry once instead of like it failing and then
pay once, cry once.
Yeah.
And it's now there's some things you can't do that in life with, right? Mm-hmm. Some people are like, that doesn't mean like, oh, I'm going to go out and get the most expensive whatever because it's the most expensive. It's not about the cost of something. It's about what is the value that will bring into your life. And I think there's a critical eye that and what's fascinating is we're losing that culturally when, it's so easy to buy stuff on Amazon. That'll solve a problem today. That'll solve a problem today. Or Temu. Do you see more and more Temu ads? I do. Right? It's like there's this Temu quality. It's even, the minute you say Temu, nobody's thinking like, oh, good quality stuff. What are they thinking?
This is like going to work for 2 hours.
Yeah, this is going to work. And this is what I would challenge for us. This will work as long as I have vision for. Like all I have vision for is getting through today. Then you'll have a Temu vision. Now, there's some things that, like I like tools, right?
No.
I have all kinds of tools.
Every year, it's a different tool on the wish list.
Yep. And now I have a garage filled with tools. And that's why we can buy the last 2 homes we've owned were a little bit of fixer-uppers, right? And we fixed them up, and we've been able to make our investment and more back and things, which is, I'm glad I have the skills that I learned from when I was in construction at your papa's company, my dad's company. There's a bunch of opportunities that were presented to me for us to be able to be in that position. At the same time, there's some tools that's like, I don't need to buy the most expensive tool because I'm going to use it 3 times. That's all I need. But those tools I'm going to use consistently, regularly for an extended period of time. In this case, it's the ox.
Yeah.
How often will you use the ox to till your field?
And it's not just for tilling. Like you can use it for like everything else. Like it would also, its hooves could trample wheat and break the wheat apart from the grain. Like it was a multi-use tool.
It was a multi-tool.
Well, okay, I'll say this. Correct me if I'm wrong. But the thing is, like, farmers would invest and save money for an ox, not a calf. Because they might not have... You might know what you need to invest in, but it's not... There's a certain time you need to invest in it. Mm-hmm. Not, let me just get a calf because I can afford it right now, and then I'll mature it. It's like, you might not have the resources to mature this thing right now. You might need someone else to mature it before you can take responsibility and ownership of it. Because, like, okay, let's say you get a calf. It can't hold that much because it's still growing and it's still maturing, and it's not been castrated yet, so it's, like, all over the place. And, like, then you got to start feeding it, and then you got to clean after it. And you might be in that place where it's like, oh, I was supposed to get this thing, or I was supposed to do this thing. It's like, in its right time, not right now.
Yeah. And it was one of those, like, so to that point, using that as an illustration, my next step is getting an ox, right? Why? Because guess what I can do tomorrow? I can start tilling my field. I can start breaking down my grain, right? That's the thing that I can do next. So it's not unrealized potential. It's actual potential that can be employed now. And sometimes that's the step, that's the next step that people need to take in getting the ball rolling. Because once you're rolling, now, is that ox going to last forever?
No.
So what do you got to start thinking about?
You got to start saving for another ox,
I've got to start saving for another ox, or buy the calf, because now I have a little bit more resources that will then become the replacement for this ox, right? So there's this posture that I have that is towards managing. Some people they're really good at imagining what something could be instead of executing what needs to be. And so, let's kind of get out of our heads and what might be in daydreaming and all those kind of things. And let's start focusing on what can I do right now? There's a conversation I'm having with somebody over every other week. We check in and they have some goals they're trying to chase after. And my word for this year is coach. So I've been doing reading on coaching and how to ask good questions and how to draw things out for folks. And there's this strategy used in the conversation. And the last question I always ask them is, what are you going to do? Because we've been talking about what the goal is, what the realities are around the situation, what the obstacles and opportunities are. So it's all kind of ideation up to that point. And then you get to this point of like, okay, great. But what are you going to do? Like, what can you do over the next 2 weeks? Oh, I can do A, B, C. In light of everything we just talked about, I can do A, B, C, and D. Okay, great. Then let's start executing. So, anyway, yeah. So this is all about, like, to get there, you have to delay that gratification. And what I would encourage folks to consider is, where in my life do I need to start practicing delayed gratification in order to get to this place? Is that in my eating habits? Some of us have really bad eating habits.
Entertainment.
Is it in the entertainment, right? That I'm a little bit bored, I'm going to jump on my phone and, doom scroll through TikTok or Instagram or whatever it is. Is it in the way you spend money, right? Like not taking the time to sit down and budget, and where's my money going, and how is that? Well, why would I do all that? I can't hide behind. It's like, exactly, you can't hide anymore. So where do I need to kind of reel in that delayed gratification? Go like, okay, here's some things I'm going to start saying no to. Not because they're sinful, not because it's evil. I'm not saying any of that. Yeah. But I'm going to start saying delayed gratification because I want to live in abundance for this. Because remember, what's driving all this? The vision that God has given me for the community at large. Right? That's what's driving this. It's not because I want to get a fancier car. It's not because I want to take the family on a better vacation. It's not those things are fine. But what we're talking about is, I'm doing this because I want to live in abundance for the community at large. What are the needs within this community that if I had a little bit more, that I could bless some folks with? I could kind of get some situations unstuck.
Yeah. And like farmers, like if they had an excessive, like more than like what their neighbors need and more than that, they could sell that stuff and get more. Like it's very much like this it's an investment, basically. Like you put your deposit and you watch it grow, and then you get a profit from it that you wouldn't have gotten any other way. Not by winning the lottery. I mean, some people win the lottery, but like...
Yeah, but the vast majority, I mean, it's like 90% or something like that.
Yeah.
The vast majority of people who win the lottery end up broke. Why? Because the lifestyle...
The discipline.
Yeah, the lifestyle that they embraced that probably led them to playing the lottery does not help people who end up winning the lottery. Because it's, it's like I heard, I can't remember who said it, but like the lottery is like a poor people's tax. The majority of people who play the lottery are below the poverty line. Because their hope is that this other thing will happen. Okay, so
Last one.
okay, so far so here's the components of the abundant life that we feel is being expressed in this proverb. So there's a vision to contribute beyond our household, right? That's why I have the ox, because then I can produce more than what's necessary for me. It's for this larger community I'm a part of. The raw potential that needs to be worked into discipline. So I have this ox, I have this resource but it's just raw potential. So how am I gonna harness that? How am I gonna discipline that for action? And then it's a significant investment. So I'm going to take that investment that's for a better tomorrow. So I'm making this investment in this ox so that, it's not just so I can till the field today.
Yeah.
It's so that I can till the field next week and the week after that.
And like, I just thought, like, you're not probably going to buy an ox in the winter because your crops aren't like growing. Like the harvest would have just happened.
Yeah.
Like there's
a timing there's a timing to all of this. Yeah. Okay. And then last,
the mess that needs to be managed, that is not ignored or obsessed over. Because the verse says, where there are no oxen, the manger is clean. So are you too worried? Are you saying no to something because it's going to require some sort of management that is super uncomfortable? Because I've been there. I've said no to things that I didn't think was comfortable and I didn't think. But like that was a missed opportunity. Mm-hmm. And that's not what the Lord had in mind for me, was to say no.
Well, and candidly, what's the, in this proverb, what's the mess? Mess is the manure.
Yeah.
And the dirt.
And the smell.
And all the things
filth
that come with. And if you've never, it's always one of those, if you've lived in a moderately rural area or driven through one, you can always tell when you're driving by a dairy farm because of the smell that's in the air. We used to live across from some folks that had, I think, 40 head of cattle. And there's a smell that is undeniable when you're around cattle. One time I was a pastor of this church in north central Ohio, and there was a dairy farmer that attended our church. And the Watts family, great people. And we lived on one end of town. They lived on the opposite end of town. And I could get to I think the entire length between our two homes was like 2 miles. That's how big this town was. So I was in the office one day, worked on some stuff. It wasn't a busy day. And Mr. Watts called me and he said, "Hey, Milo, Pastor Milo, what are you doing right now?" And I said, "Why? What's up?" And he's like, "Do you want to come help me? I could use an extra hand." I said, "Sure, for what?" He's like, "I need to help birthing a cow." I was like, okay. So put on some grubby, work clothes. I grew up in construction, so I have construction clothes. I don't have farming clothes. And there is a difference. There is a difference between those two things. And went to he had this dairy farm and got there, and his wife, Ann, pointed me to where he was at in the barn. And so went into the barn, and there was a calf being born. But it was stuck because it was breech. It was backwards. And the hooves of this calf were sticking out. And so he said, what we're going to do is, he says, I'm going to tie a rope.
Whoa.
Yeah. Around. Have I not told you this story? I'm going to tie a rope around this
newborn's legs.
And then we're going to attach that rope to this lever that it's the base of the lever is positioned against the hind legs of the mother. And then he looks at me, he's like, you're going to pull down on that lever, and then the calf's going to come out. And I'm going to have my hands in there working this calf out while you pull on the lever. So as you're pulling, you have to be consistent and steady and smooth through it all. And I'm sitting here thinking that seems like a lot of responsibility for the first time doing this. And so I got on that lever, and he tied it off, and he said, okay, let's go. And I started pulling down on that thing, and then he started working that calf out. So whoosh, here comes this calf. And the mother was mooing during it all, and she turned around and licked this. Anyway, my point is, this barn that we were in doing this, hay, poop, filth. I mean, it's not to say
It's
that
the outside. It's times 10.
It's not to say he was like disgusting with his cat. It's like, this is what
the reality of this.
This is the reality of living on a dairy farm. This is what this environment is like. And it was an incredibly memorable moment. And it was like beautiful too. It's like, I helped bring a little calf into the world. By
pulling his liver.
Yeah, by being, providing that steady weight. And so there's this piece of like, this proverb warns against, you have to be willing to throw on your work clothes, go into the dirty place to do the dirty things if you want an abundant crop. And if you want your life to be nice and tidy and without conflict and without fuss and without much mess, and if you have to have control of everything, then you will not have an abundance that you could have, because you're more obsessed with these things than raising the crop that the Lord has for you.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very difficult lesson to learn for some folks. I know it's one that I like things nice and clean and orderly, you know how we like the house. We like it picked up and a place for everything. But there has to be some measure of, but would I rather, do I do that at the expense of, I don't want anybody coming over because they may mess up the house. Something might get ruined. Something might get broken. Something might be, and it's like, guess what? Yep. Something might get ruined. Something might get broken. Something might get whatever. But why has the Lord entrusted this house to us? Why, do you know what I mean? Like, why? So if we look at what the Lord has entrusted to our care, the question is why?
Yeah.
For what is the abundance he wants to bring, and who is that for? And so there has to be some measure of mess I've got to be prepared to tolerate. And I have to learn how to manage it, right? Because what can you do with cow manure?
You can put it in a big pile and then fertilize your field.
Yeah. Yeah, like this thing that is, it's not just something to be gotten rid of, it's something to be repurposed for the abundance. So you can't ignore it. You can't just like, well, I'm just going to let it pile up and we'll worry about tomorrow. And tomorrow never gets here, right? But then I also can't obsess over it. Like every day I got to come here. It's got to be spotless or else I just can't go to sleep. And it's like, okay, because now all your energy is going into the wrong place. There has to be this equilibrium that you kind of go, I have to manage it up to this level, which is enough for us to be able to produce the crops that we need to produce, for us to be able to be out in the field doing the work that actually needs to be done. The objective isn't clean barns. The objective is an abundance of crops.
Yes. Totally. That was great. And like, I'll say this, like, if you have nothing that can get dirty in your life, like, you gatekeep your whole life and you don't share it, you don't open up because you're afraid that that's uncomfortable, then your life is going to be relatively clean, and that's like the extent. Like, that's the only satisfaction you're going to get out of it. Like, I'll say this,
that's
like,
a really good point.
You mentioned this, like, I like having a clean car. I like the smell of a clean car. When I got my car, Dad, like, my dad, all of us are pretty relatively clean with our cars. Like, when we had a truck for a while, I drove that truck, and I, like, tried my best to keep it up. Even though it had, like, that truck smell. Like, every truck has, like a 2003 and before truck has a smell. And, like, I tried to keep that one up. And so when I got this car, I was like, Lord, like, let this car be a form of ministry. So I always kept it up clean so that it would be an inviting place. But that's not, just because it's not, there's going to be times, let me say this. I kind of had it, if it's clean, then it's inviting. Which is true. Like, you have a better experience in a clean car with someone than a dirty car. But that's not the limitation. And right now, I'm a nanny for 3 girls. And they're not messy. Like, they clean up after themselves after me, like, telling them 3 times to pick up all your trash. But, like, it's not going to be the same how it was. But because of that, I'm able to, like, serve them and be, like, a role model and encourage them, hear about their day, because their parents have other priorities. And so to me, like, this is a ministry for me to, one, have conversations with younger girls, because that's not like who I talk to. So it's fun, like, plugging into a mind of a 4-year-old. Like, I'm glad that's your care right now, because I'm not worrying about that person's hair being purple. Like, but like, I had to, like, deny myself, like, okay, it's not going to be the same. But now I have this new privilege that the Lord has entrusted me with. So instead of being so fed up on, oh, there's dirt, oh, there's crumbs, like, now I'm like, okay, Lord, like, what conversation do you want me to have next? And
it's not to say that you don't, like you said, you don't have them clean up. You remember when you got the job, my first question to you was what?
You're like, are you going to let them have food in your car?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, why not? That changed very quickly. I'm like, why don't we save that for when we get home? Can we hold it for like 11 minutes?
Okay, so that turns into a, like, well, what is clean enough, right? What is clean enough for me to be able to effectively serve this family?
And not let that irritate me.
Yeah. And as a result, it gets in the way of the relationship. And it gets in the way of your attitude towards them, and the responsibility you feel to do all the things that you just, described. And I think that's, for a lot of folks, they would rather have clean barns than an abundant life, because there's some measure of control that they're able to maintain with that. And I think that's, and as a result, like, a clean barn is a very impressive thing to look at. But an abundant life is something that the entire community benefits from, if it's postured towards the vision that God has.
Yep. So there's a field that the Lord has equipped you with and prepared you for to do, that requires an investment and the right things that you need to engage in, because that's what it requires.
Yep.
So you can share, follow, rate, and review this podcast. Yeah, like, if you like listening to us, we're pretty chill. We're pretty cool people. And you think others could benefit from this, like, send it their way. You can follow us, actually. My dad's on X, Instagram, and Facebook at Milo Curtis. I'm on Facebook at Olivia Curtis, and then Instagram at olivia.grace_28. We have a newsletter that comes out where you can get updates by visiting thisresilientsoul.com. You can also email us at hello@thisresilientsoul.com if you have any input, ways we can improve the quality of this show. That would be greatly appreciated. Live an abundant life, guys, because that's what the Lord wants. Have a great week, everyone.